So, welcome back. And I want to start this one differently than I started the last video because we're about to go somewhere that's going to challenge everything you think you know about how reality works. And I need you to stay with me through the discomfort that's about to come, because on the other side of this discomfort is the single most important understanding you'll ever have about manifestation. In the last video, I told you my story, how I created my reality unconsciously for 10 years, proving the system works, whether you understand it or not. Now I know some of you watch that and you're thinking, okay, great story, but where's the mechanism? Where's the instruction manual? What is actually happening when reality changes? And that's exactly what we're covering now, which is why this video matters more than almost any other video in this entire curriculum. Here's the question nobody's asking, but everyone should be. If you create your reality, where does the creation actually happen? Not how do I manifest, not what technique should I use, not why isn't this working for me, but where is the actual point of creation? Is it out there in the world when you take action? Is it in the universe when you send out a request? Is it in your brain when you think a thought? Where is the mechanism actually located? And the answer to that question changes everything about how you approach manifestation, which is why most teaching completely fails. Because they never answer this question clearly. They just tell you to believe more, or feel good, or take inspired action, without ever explaining where the creation is actually happening. You've been trying to change reality in the wrong location, which is why you've been frustrated, which is why nothing seems to work consistently, which is why you're here watching this video right now. Now, I know that probably sounds like I'm about to tell you the same thing every other channel tells you, and I get why you'd be skeptical, but I need you to understand something. What I'm about to show you comes from a source that is so clear, so precise, so mechanically accurate that once you understand it, you can't unknow it. This isn't inspiration. This is implementation. And the source is Seth, channeled through Jane Roberts, whose material on consciousness and reality creation is the most thorough explanation of how this mechanism works that exists anywhere. Let me give you a metaphor first, because this is easier to understand through story before we get into the mechanism itself, and this metaphor is going to make everything that follows click into place. Imagine you're sitting in a movie theater. You're watching a film on the screen in front of you. The images are moving, the story is unfolding, things are happening on that screen, and from your seat in the theater, it looks like the screen is where the action is, right? It looks like the screen is creating the experience you're having. If you don't like what you're seeing, you might think, I need to change what's on the screen. So you walk up to the screen and you try to rearrange the images there. You try to paint over the parts you don't like. You try to manipulate what you're seeing directly on that surface. But here's what you know intellectually, but forget in the moment. The screen isn't creating anything. The screen is just reflecting what's being projected from the projector. Every image, every scene, every moment of that film exists on a reel in a projector behind you, and that projector is casting those images forward onto the screen. The screen is passive. It's just a surface that reflects what's being projected onto it, which means if you want to change what you're seeing on the screen, you don't manipulate the screen, you change what's in the projector. Now, you might be thinking, okay, obvious metaphor, I get it, consciousness is the projector and physical reality is the screen. And you'd be right. But here's what I need you to really absorb. You've been trying to change the screen. You've been trying to manipulate physical reality directly, thinking that's where creation happens, thinking that if you just do more, hustle more, force more, push more in the physical world, that's where change occurs. You've been walking up to the screen of your life and trying to rearrange the images there, wondering why it's not working, wondering why it keeps resetting back to what it was. And every teacher who told you to take action without explaining where the creation happens first, they sent you to the screen, they told you the screen is the place to focus, they made you think that reality out there is where the power is. But Seth, in the clearest possible terms, explains something that changes everything. The projector is in your mind, and what's being projected outward is your consciousness, shaped by your beliefs, and physical reality is just the screen reflecting back what you're projecting. So when you look at your bank account and you see a number you don't like, you're looking at the screen. When you look at your relationship and you see someone treating you badly, you're looking at the screen. When you look at your body and you see something you want to change, you're looking at the screen. And what every failed manifestation attempt has in common is this. You tried to change the screen instead of changing what you're projecting. Now, I know what you're thinking right now, because I thought the same thing when I first encountered this. Wait, are you telling me that physical reality isn't real? That it's all just in my head? That sounds like spiritual bypass. That sounds like denial of what's actually happening. That sounds dangerous. And I need to be clear about this, because this is where most people completely misunderstand what Seth is teaching and where most manifestation education fails. Seth is not saying physical reality isn't real. He's saying the direction of creation is backwards from what you think it is. You think reality creates your inner state, when actually your inner state creates reality. You think external circumstances cause your thoughts and feelings, when actually your thoughts and feelings cause external circumstances. You think you're a victim of your environment, when actually you create your environment. The realness of physical reality is not in question. The direction of causation is what you've had backwards your entire life. Here's what you've been taught, probably since childhood, definitely through school, absolutely through every system that wants to control you. External reality is the cause. Your internal state is the effect. Something happens out there in the world, and then you react to it in here in your mind. Someone treats you badly, and then you feel bad. Your bank account is low, and then you feel stressed about money. Your body gets sick, and then you think worried thoughts about health. The world does something to you, and you respond. Cause and effect. Simple, obvious, everyone agrees on this. But Seth explains, with precision that cannot be dismissed, that this is completely backwards, and the reason you've never been able to consistently create what you want is because you've been trying to change the effect instead of changing the cause. You've been trying to feel good after circumstances change, when you need to feel good before circumstances change. You've been trying to think abundant thoughts after money shows up, when you need to think abundant thoughts before money shows up. You've been waiting for external reality to give you permission to change your internal state, when your internal state is what creates external reality in the first place. And I know that sounds wild. I know that contradicts everything you've learned. I know you're probably feeling some resistance right now, thinking, but I can see reality happening to me. I can see that I didn't create this job loss, this breakup, this diagnosis, and we're going to address all of that. But first, you need to understand the mechanism. You need to see how this works. Because without the mechanism, you'll just reject this as too impossible, too magical, too divorced from reality as you experience it. You know how I know you've had this backwards? Because you've tried to manifest something, right? You've tried affirmations, visualization, vision boards, gratitude practices, action steps, all the techniques, and when it didn't work, what did every teacher tell you? They told you didn't believe enough, or you had limiting beliefs, or you weren't aligned. But they never explained where those beliefs live, how they create reality, what the mechanism is that turns belief into experience. They just blamed you for not doing it right, which made you feel like a failure, which reinforced the very pattern you were trying to break. So let me give you what Seth actually teaches, word for word, because this is too important to paraphrase. This is too precise to water down. This needs to be stated exactly as he states it, because the clarity of this language is what makes it impossible to misunderstand once you really hear it. Seth says, "The living picture of the world grows within the mind. The world as it appears to you is like a three-dimensional painting in which each individual takes a hand." Read that again, slowly, because every word matters. The living picture of the world grows within the mind. Not grows in the world, and then you perceive it in the mind, not grows in the universe, and then manifests in your life. Grows within the mind first, and only then does it appear in the world. He continues, "Each color, each line that appears within it has first been painted within a mind, and only then does it materialize without. First painted within a mind, only then materializes without. Inside comes first, outside comes second, not the other way around." This is not metaphor, this is not poetry, this is literal description of how the mechanism works. And the reason most people miss this is because they read it and then immediately revert back to thinking, okay, but the world still happens to me, without actually absorbing the full implications of what's being said. Here, Seth is describing a mechanism where consciousness creates form, not where form influences consciousness. He's explaining that every single thing you see in physical reality, your bank account, your relationships, your body, your opportunities, your obstacles, your successes, your failures, all of it appears within your mind. First, as a mental construct, as a thought form, as a belief about what's possible or what's real or what you deserve, and only after it exists in your mind does it then materialize in physical reality. Now you might be thinking, but I didn't create the car accident that happened to me, and we'll get to how your beliefs intersect with other people's projections. But first, I need you to understand that what you're calling the car accident that happened to me is already observer-dependent language. It's already assuming causation flows from outside to inside. It's already placing you in victim position before you even examine what actually occurred, which is why we need to go deeper into how this mechanism works before we address the complications. Let me give you another quote from Seth that makes this even clearer. There is no effect in the exterior world that does not spring from an inner source. There is no motion that does not first occur within the mind. No effect in the exterior world that does not spring from an inner source. No motion that does not first occur within the mind. He's not saying most effects or many motions. He's saying no effect, no motion. This is absolute. This is the rule. This is how the mechanism works every single time, without exception. And the reason this matters is because you've been treating physical reality as if it has independent existence, as if it can cause things to happen to you, as if you're subject to forces beyond your control, when actually physical reality is the result, not the cause. It's the materialization of what was already true in consciousness. It's the external reflection of your internal state. It's the three-dimensional manifestation of your belief system projected outward into form. Now let me make this brutally clear with examples from your own life, because the fastest way to understand this mechanism is to see it already working in your experience. And once you see it working, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to thinking reality happens to you. You'll never be able to maintain that illusion again. Think about a time when you believed something so completely, so totally, so absolutely that you didn't even question it. Maybe you believed, I'm not good at math, and when math class came, you struggled, you felt confused, you got bad grades, and that belief kept proving itself true year after year. Or maybe you believed people always leave me, and sure enough, relationship after relationship ended, people did leave, the pattern repeated itself over and over. Or maybe you believed money is hard to come by, and no matter what job you took, what opportunities showed up, you always found yourself struggling financially. Now here's the question that matters. Did those external circumstances cause the belief, or did the belief cause the external circumstances? Most people would say the circumstances caused the belief. That you tried math, and it was hard, so you developed the belief, I'm not good at math. That people left you, and therefore you developed the belief, people always leave me. That you struggled with money, and therefore you developed the belief, money is hard to come by. Cause and effect, experience shapes belief, makes perfect sense. But Seth explains the opposite is true. The belief existed first, then you filtered perception through that belief, then you generated emotions based on that filtered perception. Then you took behaviors aligned with those emotions. Then those behaviors produced results that matched the original belief. And then you looked at those results and said, see, I was right. This is how reality is. The belief came first, everything else followed, which means the entire external experience was a projection of the internal belief, not the other way around. And you know how I can prove this to you? Because if external circumstances created beliefs, then everyone who experiences the same circumstances would develop the same beliefs. Everyone who struggles in math class would believe, I'm not good at math. Everyone who has a relationship end would believe, people always leave me. Everyone who faces financial difficulty would believe, money is hard to come by. But they don't, do they? Some people struggle in math class and believe, I just need to study harder. Some people have relationships end and believe that person wasn't right for me. Some people face financial difficulty and believe this is temporary. Things will get better. Same external circumstance, completely different beliefs, which proves that the external circumstance isn't creating the belief. The belief is filtering the external circumstance and creating the emotional response and driving the behavior and producing the result that confirms what was already believed. Inside creates outside. Then outside seems to validate inside, creating the illusion that outside came first. Now I'm about to show you something that's going to bend your mind. And I need you to stay with me on this, because this is where most people check out. This is where the resistance gets really strong. This is where you want to reject what's being said because it's too confrontational to accept. But this is also where the real power lives. This is where you stop being a victim and start being a creator. Seth says, and I want you to really hear this, you project your thoughts, feelings, and expectations outward, then you perceive them as the outside reality. You are observing yourself from the standpoint of your own projections. You project outward, then you perceive outward, which means you're not observing objective reality. You're observing your reality, shaped by your projections, filtered through your beliefs, colored by your expectations. Let me break down what this means in practical terms, because this is not abstract philosophy. This is mechanical description of what's happening right now in your experience. When you look at your bank account, you're not looking at objective financial reality. You're looking at your projection of what you believe about money, about yourself, about deservingness, about how the world works, about what's possible, and that projection materializes as a specific number on a screen, and you look at that number and you think that's reality, when actually that's your reality, created by your projection. When you look at how someone is treating you in a relationship, you're not looking at objective interpersonal reality, you're looking at your projection of your worthiness, your lovability, your expectations about relationships, your beliefs about how people see you, and that projection materializes as specific behaviors from the other person. And you look at those behaviors and you think that's who they are, when actually that's who they are to you. And your projection filtered through your beliefs about yourself. When you look at your body in the mirror, you're not looking at objective physical reality, you're looking at your projection of your health beliefs, your body image beliefs, your aging beliefs, your vitality beliefs, and that projection materializes as the physical form you see, and you look at that form and you think this is genetics, or this is aging, or this is just how my body is, when actually this is how your body is, based on what you project through. Belief. Now I know what you're thinking. Wait, so are you saying nothing is real? That it's all just in my head? That other people don't have their own reality? And no, that's not what Seth is saying. That's not what I'm saying. And this is where we need to be really clear about what projection means in this context. Because projection doesn't mean making things up. Projection means consciousness taking form, and other people absolutely have their own consciousness, their own projections, their own beliefs creating their own reality, and where those realities intersect is what you experience as shared physical reality. Let me make this concrete with money. Because money is where most people want manifestation to work, and it's also where most people have the strongest resistance to accepting that they're creating what they see. Because looking at a bank account that's empty or struggling feels so real, so objective, so outside of your control, that admitting you created it feels like self-blame, which is why I need to be clear that this is not about blame, this is about mechanism. You have a belief about money, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Maybe that belief is money is hard to earn, or rich people are greedy, or I'm not good with money, or there's never enough, or you have to work hard to make money, or money comes and goes, or I don't deserve wealth. That belief exists in your mind as a thought structure, as a conviction, as an assumption about how reality works. And that belief is the projector, it's the source. It's what's creating the image that appears on the screen of your bank account. So what does that belief do? It filters your perception. It makes you notice opportunities that confirm the belief and delete opportunities that contradict the belief. It generates emotions aligned with the belief. So if you believe money is hard to earn, you feel scarcity, you feel anxiety, you feel like you have to struggle. Those emotions then drive your behavior. So you take actions from that feeling of scarcity, you make decisions from that feeling of anxiety, you approach opportunities from that feeling of struggle, and those behaviors produce results that match the original belief. And here's where it gets really clear. Those results then materialize as specific numbers in your bank account, as specific job opportunities that show up or don't show up, as specific income levels that you plateau at, and you look at those external results and you think, see, money is hard to earn, this is reality. When actually what you're seeing is your projection of your belief about money materialized into form so you can observe it, and the observation reinforces the belief, which strengthens the projection, which creates more of the same results. This is why changing your relationship with money by trying to make more money doesn't work long term. You can get a better job, win the lottery, receive an inheritance, and if the underlying belief hasn't changed, if the projection is still money is hard to earn or I don't deserve wealth, you will find a way to lose that money, to sabotage that opportunity, to return to the state that matches your projection. Because physical reality is always trying to align with your mental reality, not the other way around. And this is why every money manifestation technique you've tried has failed unless it actually changed the belief, unless it shifted the projection at the source. Affirmations don't work if you don't believe them, because you're trying to change the screen by saying words while the projector is still broadcasting the same belief. Visualization doesn't work if it's just imagination divorced from conviction, because you're creating a fantasy screen while your actual projection remains unchanged. Action doesn't work if it's driven by scarcity consciousness, because you're hustling from the belief money is hard, which just creates more experiences that confirm money is hard. What does work is changing the belief at the source, changing what's in the projector, which then changes what gets projected onto the screen of physical reality, which then materializes as different numbers in your bank account, different opportunities showing up, different income levels becoming available, and you look at those new results and they feel like external miracles when actually they're just the natural consequence of internal shift. Let me show you the same mechanism in relationships, because this is where projection becomes undeniable, and this is also where most people have the strongest emotional resistance, because admitting you're creating how people treat you feels like you're excusing bad behavior, which again is why I need to be clear, this is about mechanism, not morality. You have a belief about your worthiness, your lovability, how people see you, what you deserve in relationships, whether you're attractive, whether you're interesting, whether people want to be around you. Maybe that belief is, I'm not good enough, or people always leave, or I'm too much, or nobody really understands me, or I have to earn love, or relationships always end badly. That belief is in your mind, operating as the filter through which you perceive all interpersonal interactions. And it's the projector broadcasting outward into your relationship experiences. So what happens? That belief filters your perception of how others behave toward you. If you believe I'm not good enough, you will notice every time someone seems distant, every time they don't text back immediately, every time they criticize you, and you will delete or distort every time someone shows you love, every time they compliment you, every time they prioritize you. Your perception is literally filtering data through the belief, which generates emotions of unworthiness, insecurity, anxiety, and those emotions drive your behavior in the relationship. You might become clingy because you're trying to prevent abandonment. You might become distant because you're trying to protect yourself. You might test the other person constantly to see if they'll leave. You might sabotage moments of connection because vulnerability feels dangerous when you believe you're not good enough. And all of those behaviors influence how the other person experiences being in relationship with you, which then influences how they treat you, which then confirms the original belief, I'm not good enough. And you look at their behavior and you think, see, they're pulling away. I knew I wasn't good enough. When actually you created that pulling away through the projection of your belief. Now I can hear the objection already. Wait, are you saying abuse is the victim's fault? That if someone treats me badly, I created that? And no, that's not what I'm saying. Because we're talking about mechanism, not morality. And there's a huge difference between saying you created this experience through projection and saying you deserve this experience because you're bad. Seth is explaining how reality creation works, not making moral judgments about who's good or bad in any situation. What Seth's saying is that you cannot experience something you're not a vibrational match to. You cannot attract into your reality something that doesn't align with your belief system. You cannot observe something you're not the frequency of, which means if you're experiencing someone treating you badly, there is a belief somewhere in your system that is projecting that experience into manifestation, and finding that belief and changing it is how you stop experiencing that pattern. Not by trying to change other people's behavior, not by trying to find someone better next time, but by changing what you're projecting so you stop creating that experience entirely. Let me show you this one more time with your body, because this is where the projection principle becomes undeniable. And this is also where you've probably had the most proof that inside creates outside without realizing you were seeing proof. You have beliefs about your body, about health, about aging, about what your body can and cannot do, about what runs in your family, about what's normal for someone your age, about how difficult it is to be healthy, about whether your body is working for you or against you. Those beliefs are operating right now as the projector broadcasting into your physical form, shaping what's possible, determining what manifests in your actual flesh and blood and bone. Seth says, and this is so clear, it cannot be misunderstood, you are the living picture of yourself. You project what you think you are outward into flesh. Not your body reflects your genetics. Not your body is subject to external factors. You project what you think you are outward into flesh. Your body is the most immediate, most undeniable, most obvious example of consciousness taking form, and yet you've been taught to think of your body as separate from your mind, as something that happens to you rather than something you're creating constantly. So what does this mean practically? If you believe I get sick easily, your body will express that belief through frequent illness. If you believe aging means deterioration, your body will age in ways that confirm that belief. If you believe my back always hurts, your back will continue to hurt. If you believe I'm exhausted all the time, you will experience exhaustion regardless of how much rest you get. The belief is the projector, the body is the screen, and what appears on that screen is always, always, always a reflection of what's being projected. And you know I'm right about this because you've experienced it. You've had a day where you were thinking negative thoughts all morning, you felt terrible, you felt heavy, you felt tired, and then something great happened. You got good news. Someone called, you had a breakthrough, and suddenly your body felt different. You had energy, you felt light, the tiredness disappeared. Did your body's objective physical state change in that instant? Or did your mental state change, which then changed your projection, which then changed how your body expressed itself? You've had the experience of believing you're getting sick, telling yourself, I'm getting sick, feeling the symptoms, and then sometimes you actually get sick and sometimes the symptoms disappear. What determined which one happened? You've had the experience of thinking you look terrible in the mirror one day and thinking you look great in the mirror another day. Same body, different thought, different projection, different perception. You've had the experience of exercise feeling impossible when you believed it would be hard, and exercise feeling easy when you believed it would be energizing. Your body is responding to your consciousness every single moment. It's not an independent entity, following genetic programming divorced from your beliefs. It's a living expression of what you think and feel and expect. It's a three-dimensional manifestation of your inner state, projected outward into physical form. And the reason you haven't been able to change your body permanently through diet or exercise alone is because you've been trying to change the screen instead of changing the projector. Now I need to address something that's probably bothering you right now. Because if inside creates outside, if beliefs project reality, if consciousness comes first, then what's the point of action? What's the point of doing anything in the physical world? Should you just sit at home visualizing your desires and wait for them to appear? And this is where most manifestation teaching completely fails. Because they either tell you, just believe and it will come, without acknowledging the role of action, or they tell you, you have to take massive action without acknowledging the role of consciousness, and both approaches miss how the mechanism actually works. Seth is not saying action doesn't matter. He's saying action without aligned consciousness is just physical movement that doesn't change anything. And consciousness without action is just mental activity that has no bridge to physical reality. The mechanism is consciousness, projects through belief, belief generates emotion, emotion drives behavior, behavior produces, results in physical reality, and then results reinforce the original consciousness. This is a complete loop, not a one-way street, and action is part of the loop, but it's not the source of the loop. Let me give you an example that makes this crystal clear. Imagine two people both take the same action, they both apply for the same job, they both have the same qualifications, they both present themselves well, they both do everything right from an external perspective. One person gets the job, the other doesn't. External action alone cannot explain the different results, can it? Same action, different outcomes, which means something other than the action itself determined the result, and that something is the consciousness behind the action, the belief system projecting through the action the state of being from which the action was taken. One person applied for the job believing, I'm a great fit for this. They'd be lucky to have me. And the other person applied believing, I hope they don't see all the ways I'm not qualified. I hope they give me a chance even though I'm probably not good enough. Same external action, completely different internal projections. And the hiring manager, who has their own consciousness, their own projection, will respond to the state of being they're perceiving, not just the words on the resume, which means the person who believes they're qualified will project confidence, competence, deservingness that the hiring manager perceives and responds to, and the person who believes they're not qualified will project uncertainty, inadequacy, hope for acceptance that the hiring manager perceives and responds to. This is why taking action alone doesn't work, why you can hustle and grind and do all the right things and still not get the results you want. Because if the consciousness behind the action is projecting lack, struggle, unworthiness, fear, desperation, that's what you're creating, that's what's materializing, That's what the world is responding to, and the action becomes just motion without power, just physical movement without creative force behind it. So let me state this as clearly as possible, because this is the mechanism, this is the rule, this is how reality creation works, and there is no other way. Consciousness creates form, not the other way around. Consciousness comes first, always, without exception, and physical reality is the materialization of consciousness, the three-dimensional expression of belief, the externalization of inner state. Seth says what exists physically exists first in thought and feeling. There is no other rule. First in thought and feeling, then in physical form. Not physical form influences thought and feeling. Not sometimes physical comes first. First in thought and feeling. No other rule, no exceptions, no circumstances where this mechanism works differently. And this is why every manifestation technique that focuses on changing the physical without changing the consciousness fails. This is why affirmations don't work if you don't actually believe them, because you're trying to put new words over the old projection without changing what's in the projector. This is why vision boards don't work if you look at them with longing or lack, because you're projecting, I don't have this yet, while looking at images of what you want. And the projection is what creates, not the images. This is why taking action doesn't work if the action is driven by fear or desperation, because the consciousness behind the action is projecting more of the fear and desperation, not the solution. What does work is consciousness shift first, which then naturally produces aligned action, which then produces physical results that match the shifted consciousness. You change the belief about money, which changes how you feel about money, which changes what actions feel natural and obvious around money, which produces different results with money. You change the belief about your worthiness, which changes how you feel in relationships, which changes how you show up with people, which changes how people treat you. You change the belief about your body, which changes how you feel physically, which changes what behaviors emerge naturally, which changes what your body expresses. Consciousness first, always, without exception. And once you really understand this, once you stop trying to force change in the physical world and start changing consciousness first, everything becomes easier because you're working with the mechanism instead of against it. You're going to the projector instead of trying to manipulate the screen. You're creating at the source instead of trying to manage the effects. Now, I want you to do something with me right now, and this might feel uncomfortable, but I need you to look at your current physical reality, whatever that is, and I want you to ask yourself a question that you've probably never asked before. What am I actually observing? Look at your bank account, look at that number, and instead of thinking, this is reality, this is my financial situation, this is what I have to work with, I want you to ask, what belief am I projecting that created this number? What do I believe about money, about myself, about what's possible, about what I deserve, about how the world works, that would create exactly this result? Look at your relationships. Look at how people are treating you. And instead of thinking, this is who they are, this is just how relationships work, this is what I attract, I want you to ask, what belief am I projecting that created this dynamic? What do I believe about my worthiness, my lovability, what I deserve, how people see me? That would create exactly this experience. Look at your body, look at how you feel, what you see in the mirror, and instead of thinking this is genetics, this is aging, this is just my body, I want you to ask, what belief am I projecting that created this physical state? What do I believe about health, aging, vitality, what my body can do that would create exactly this form? Because here's what Seth is teaching. You are not observing objective reality. You are observing your projection. You're looking at the screen and thinking you're seeing something independent of you, when actually you're seeing something you created, something you projected, something that exists because you believed it into existence. And the only reason it looks objective is because the projection materialized so completely that you forgot you were the projector. And this is the hardest part for most people. This is where the resistance is strongest. Because accepting that you're observing your projection means accepting that you created what you're seeing. And if what you're seeing is struggle, pain, limitation, failure, accepting that you created that feels like self-blame, feels like you're bad or wrong or defective for having created it. But Seth is not making a moral judgment. He's explaining a mechanism. And the mechanism doesn't care about good or bad. It just operates. It just creates. It just projects consciousness into form. Let me show you this from another angle using Bashar's framework. Because Seth gives us the mechanism, and Bashar confirms the same mechanism from a different perspective. which makes it even clearer that this is not opinion, this is not philosophy, this is mechanical description of how consciousness and reality interact. Bashar teaches, circumstances don't matter, only state of being matters. And what does that mean? It means the external circumstances you're observing don't have independent power to create your experience. Only your state of being, your consciousness, your projection has creative power. The circumstances are the reflection. Your state of being is what's being reflected, and you cannot change the reflection by manipulating the mirror. You change the reflection by changing what's standing in front of the mirror. He also teaches, physical reality is a mirror. It has no ability to create. It only reflects what you are. The mirror doesn't create the reflection. The mirror just shows you what's there. And if you don't like what you see in the mirror, you don't paint the mirror, you change what's being reflected. Physical reality is the mirror. Your consciousness is what's being reflected, and what you're calling my life or my circumstances or what's happening to me is just the mirror showing you what you've been projecting. And Bashar takes this even further with a teaching that's going to blow your mind. You cannot observe something you are not the vibration of. Let me say that again because this is the key. You cannot observe something you are not the vibration of. If you see poverty, you are the vibration of poverty. If you see betrayal, you are the vibration of betrayal. If you see opportunity, you are the vibration of opportunity. If you see support, you are the vibration of support. You can only observe what you are, which means everything you're observing right now is proof of what you're projecting, is evidence of your state of being, is the mirror reflecting back your consciousness. Now you might be thinking, wait, so if I see a homeless person on the street, does that mean I'm homeless? And no, that's not how vibration works. That's not what Bashar means, because vibration in this context means the belief system that creates perception, not the exact circumstance. So if you see a homeless person and you feel sympathy, you're the vibration of compassion if you see them and you feel fear. You're the vibration of scarcity if you see them and you feel judgment. You're the vibration of separation. And what you feel when you observe is what reveals your vibration, which then creates more experiences that match that vibration. Now let me show you the same teaching from a third source, because when Seth, Bashar, and Neville all teach the same mechanism from different angles, you can't dismiss this as one person's opinion. This is convergent understanding of how consciousness works. And Neville's articulation of this is so poetic and so precise that it lands differently than Seth's clinical description or Bashar's mirror metaphor. Neville quotes William Blake, "All you behold, though it appears without, it is within in your imagination, of which this world of mortality is but a shadow. All you behold, though it appears without, it is within. It appears external, objective, independent, but it is internal, subjective, dependent on your imagination. The world you're looking at is a shadow, a projection, a three-dimensional image of what exists first in imagination, and you're the one imagining it into being. You're the one projecting it outward. You're the one observing yourself from the standpoint of your own creation. Neville teaches, you bear your heaven and your hell in your own bosom, not in the external world, not in other people, not in circumstances, in your own bosom, meaning in your consciousness. In your beliefs, in your state of being, and what you bear internally is what projects. Externally is what you then observe as reality, is what you then call my life." And Neville's whole technique system is based on this understanding. Go within first, change consciousness first, assume the wish fulfilled internally before it manifests externally. And once the internal state shifts, the external has to follow, because external is just the shadow of internal, the projection of consciousness, the materialization of what was already true in imagination. So now you have three sources, Seth explaining the projection principle, Bashar explaining the mirror principle, Neville explaining the imagination principle, and all three are describing the same mechanism. Consciousness creates form, inside creates outside. What you think and feel internally projects outward and becomes what you observe externally. Now I know some of you are feeling resistance right now, and I want to acknowledge that resistance because it's not irrational, it's not wrong. It's actually a very natural response to information that threatens your entire worldview, your entire identity as someone things happen. And I need you to understand why this is so hard to accept before we can move forward. You've been taught your entire life that you're a victim of circumstances, that reality happens to you, that your job is to cope with, adapt to, survive in a world that exists independently of your consciousness. And this teaching gave you a strange kind of comfort because it meant nothing was your fault. You weren't responsible for the bad things that happened. You could blame external forces, other people, bad luck, the economy, your genetics, your childhood, your trauma, and all of that blame created a buffer between you and the discomfort of your experience. But Seth, Bashar, Neville, they're all saying there is no buffer, there is no separation, there is no external force creating your experience. You are the creator, you are the source, you are the projector. And everything you're observing is something you projected, consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or accidentally. But you created it, you manifested it, you called it into being through your belief system. And accepting that means accepting that the poverty you're experiencing, you created. The betrayal you experienced, you created. The illness you're facing, you created. The loneliness you feel, you created. And that feels impossible to accept because it feels like you're saying, I chose to suffer. When actually what you're saying is, I believed something that created suffering. And now that I understand the mechanism, I can change the belief and therefore change the experience. You've also been taught that changing your external reality requires external action, that you have to do things in the world to make things different, that wishing or thinking or believing isn't enough. You have to hustle and grind and force and push. And this teaching made you feel powerful in a certain way because it meant you could control outcomes through sheer effort. And accepting that consciousness creates reality means accepting that all that hustling without consciousness shift was wasted energy, was trying to change the screen instead of changing the projector, was action without power behind it. So the resistance you're feeling right now, it's your ego trying to protect you from the implications of what I'm teaching, trying to maintain the illusion that you're a victim so you can keep the comfort of blame, trying to maintain the illusion that external action is what matters so you can keep the comfort of feeling like you're in control through doing. But the truth is harder and more empowering. You create through consciousness first, external action follows from internal state, and accepting this means accepting full responsibility for your experience while also accepting full creative power to change your experience. So let's talk about what this actually means. Because once you really absorb this, once you really understand that you're observing yourself from the standpoint of your own projections, once you really accept that consciousness creates reality from inside out, the implications are so staggering, so far-reaching, so completely transformative that your entire approach to life has to change. It means you are never stuck. Never. Because if your external circumstances are projections of your internal state, and if you can change your internal state, then you can change your external circumstances always, without exception, no matter how bad things look right now, no matter how impossible change seems, no matter how long you've been in this pattern. You are never stuck unless you believe you're stuck, and that belief is just another projection that can be changed. It means you are not a victim of anything. Not of your past, not of other people, not of the economy, not of genetics, not of bad luck, not of any external force whatsoever, because external forces are not creating your experience. Your consciousness is creating your experience, and you have control over your consciousness, you have authority over your beliefs, you have the power to change what you're projecting at any moment. The victim identity is just another projection, and you can stop projecting it. It means everything you're observing is evidence. Not evidence of how the world is, but evidence of what you believe, evidence of what you're projecting, evidence of your state of consciousness. And if you don't like what you're observing, you don't need to figure out how to change the external circumstances. You need to figure out what belief is creating those circumstances so you can change the belief and therefore change the circumstances automatically. It means you are infinitely more powerful than you thought. Not through external action, not through force or control or manipulation, but through consciousness, through belief, through projection, through the mechanism that's always been operating, but you didn't understand it, so you couldn't use it deliberately. You have been using this mechanism your entire life, creating your reality through projection, whether you knew it or not. And now that you know how it works, now that you understand the mechanism, you can use it consciously, deliberately, systematically to create what you actually want instead of unconsciously creating what you fear. And it means manifestation is not magic, it's mechanics. It's not about the universe granting wishes or attracting things to you or quantum leaping to parallel realities or any of the mystical explanations that make this seem impossible. It's about consciousness projecting through belief, perception filtering according to that belief, emotion generating from that filtered perception, behavior arising from that emotion, results manifesting from that behavior, and those results reinforcing the original consciousness. That's the mechanism. That's the loop. That's how creation works. And once you understand the mechanism, you can operate it deliberately instead of accidentally. Now I need to address the obvious complication that's probably bothering you, because if everyone is projecting their own reality, if everyone's consciousness is creating their own experience, how do we live in a shared world? How do our individual projections interact with each other? If I'm projecting one reality and you're projecting another reality, how does that work when we're both in the same physical space? Seth addresses this directly, and the answer is both more complex and more elegant than you might think. Shared reality is the intersection of multiple projections. The physical world you experience is not one person's projection, it's the cooperative creation of all consciousness participating in that shared reality, and where your projection intersects with someone else's projection is what you both experience as objective reality. So let me give you an example. If you believe people are generally friendly, and you encounter someone who believes people are generally hostile, what happens in the interaction between you? You will project friendliness, and they will project hostility, and the actual interaction will be some combination of both projections intersecting some middle ground where both of you are partially proven right, partially experiencing your own projection, partially experiencing the other person's projection. But here's where it gets interesting. You can only attract into your experience people whose projections match your projection closely enough to intersect. If you believe everyone abandons me, you cannot attract into your experience someone who believes I am loyal and committed in all my relationships, because those projections are too different to create a sustained intersection. The vibrations are too far apart to maintain contact. You will attract people whose projections about relationships are close enough to yours to create the abandonment pattern you believe in, even if they think they're trying to stay. This is why changing your projection changes who shows up in your life, who stays in your life, who leaves your life. Because as your projection shifts, the people whose projections can still intersect with yours will naturally remain, and the people whose projections no longer match will naturally drift away, and new people whose projections match your new state will naturally appear. You're not attracting them in some magical sense. You're creating intersection points where consciousness can meet, and those intersection points shift as your consciousness shifts. Now let me address the other complication. What about mass events, natural disasters, economic crashes, pandemics, wars, things that seem to happen to everyone regardless of individual projection? How does the projection principle explain collective experiences that nobody seemed to consciously choose? Seth teaches something that's going to challenge you even more. There are no accidents, there are no victims, even in mass events, because every consciousness participating in that event chose to participate at some level, and that choice might be conscious or unconscious, might be deliberate or accidental, might be for growth or for experience or for contrast, but the participation is not random. The consciousness did not get caught in something external to its creative power. Now, before you reject this as too extreme, too heartless, too impossible to accept, let me clarify. This is not about blame. This is not about saying people who suffer in mass events deserved it or caused it through moral failure. This is about understanding that consciousness operates in larger patterns than individual ego awareness. And sometimes consciousness participates in mass events for reasons the ego doesn't understand or agree with, for experience, for growth, for soul-level purposes that the personality level doesn't consciously choose. What this means practically is that you cannot be part of a mass event unless some part of your consciousness is in vibrational alignment with that event. Unless your belief system creates a projection that intersects with the mass projection creating the event. And if your consciousness is not in alignment with that event, if your projection does not match the mass projection, you will not be there. You will miss the disaster. You will be somewhere else. You will be protected by the natural mechanism of consciousness not participating in what it doesn't project. This is why some people get on the plane that crashes and some people miss the plane for weird last-minute reasons. This is why some people are in the building that collapses and some people called in sick that day for no logical reason. This is why some people are in the city when the disaster hits and some people left the day before on impulse. The ego calls it luck or coincidence or timing. But Seth teaches it's consciousness self-selecting based on projection, based on what serves the larger purposes of that particular consciousness at that particular time. Now let me bring this back to your experience. Because the fastest way to know if this is true is to look at your own life and see the mechanism operating, see the projection principle working, see consciousness creating form in ways you can't deny once you see them. Think about a belief you changed at some point in your life. Maybe you used to believe, I'm not athletic, and then you started exercising, you started seeing results, you started believing, actually, I am capable of being fit. And then suddenly your body changed, your energy changed, your capabilities changed, not because you forced your body through sheer will, but because you changed the projection, and the projection created new results that matched the new belief. Or maybe you used to believe, I'm terrible at public speaking, and then you had to speak in public for work or school. You survived it, you got positive feedback, you started believing, actually I can do this. And then suddenly speaking felt easier, you felt more confident, opportunities to speak showed up, not because you became a different person externally, but because you changed the belief, which changed the projection, which changed the experience. Or maybe you believed relationships never work out for me, and then you met someone who treated you differently. You started believing, maybe I can be loved. You started projecting worthiness instead of unworthiness, and then the relationship worked. Not because you finally found the right person, but because you finally changed what you were projecting so you could attract and maintain a relationship with someone whose projection matched your new state. You've had these experiences, right? You've changed a belief and watched reality shift to match the new belief, and you probably called it personal growth or gaining confidence or learning a new skill, when actually what you were doing was changing what you project, which automatically changed what you observe, because consciousness creates form, inside creates outside, belief generates reality. And here's the proof you can't deny. You've also had the opposite experience. You've changed something externally without changing the belief, and the change didn't last. You lost the weight and then gained it back because the belief, I'm overweight, didn't change. You made more money and then lost it because the belief, money is hard to come by, didn't change. You got into a relationship and then it ended the same way all the others ended because the belief, people always leave, didn't change. The external change without internal shift always reverts back to match the projection, always, without exception, which proves that the projection is the source, not the external circumstance. So now you have a choice. And I want to be really clear about this because this is the turning point. This is where you either accept what I'm teaching and everything changes, or you reject it and nothing changes. And either choice is valid, but only one leads to the power you want. The choice is, do you want to remain a victim of reality, or do you want to become a conscious creator of reality? Victim means reality happens to you. Circumstances are beyond your control. You're subject to forces outside yourself. Your job is to cope with, adapt to, survive in a world that doesn't care about your desires. And when things don't work out, it's because of bad luck, other people, the economy, your past, your trauma, your genetics, your environment, all the external factors that you cannot change and therefore cannot be blamed for experiencing. Creator means reality happens from you. Circumstances are projections of your consciousness. You're the source of the forces creating your experience. Your job is to consciously manage your beliefs so they project what you actually want. And when things don't work out, it's because you're projecting something that doesn't match your desire, which means you can find the belief, change the projection, and create different results. Victim is comfortable in a certain way because you're not responsible. Creator is uncomfortable in a certain way because you're completely responsible. And most people choose victim because responsibility feels like blame, when actually responsibility is power. Responsibility means ability to respond, means you have creative power, means you're not helpless, means you can change anything by changing consciousness first. And here's what nobody tells you. You've been creating your reality as a victim all along. You didn't stop creating just because you didn't understand the mechanism. You didn't become exempt from the projection principle just because you thought reality was happening to you. You were still projecting, still creating, still materializing consciousness into form. You were just doing it unconsciously, accidentally, based on unexamined beliefs you didn't know you had. And that unconscious creation produced the struggle, the limitation, the pain you've been experiencing. So the choice is not, should I create or not? The choice is, should I create consciously or unconsciously? Should I understand the mechanism and use it deliberately to project what I want? Or should I remain ignorant of the mechanism and continue projecting whatever unconscious beliefs are operating, and then wondering why life is hard, why manifestation doesn't work, why I can't seem to change my circumstances no matter how hard I try? So if you're with me this far, if you're accepting that consciousness creates reality, that inside creates outside, that you're observing yourself from the standpoint of your own projections, then the question you should be asking now is not, how do I manifest what I want? The question is, what determines what gets projected? Because here's what we've established. Consciousness projects outward, beliefs filter perception, perception generates emotion, emotion drives behavior, behavior produces results, results reinforce consciousness. That's the mechanism, that's the loop, that's how creation works. But what determines which beliefs are operating? What determines what your consciousness is projecting at any given moment? What determines whether you're projecting abundance or scarcity, worthiness or unworthiness, possibility or limitation? Seth has given us the mechanism, the understanding that inside creates outside, the projection principle, the consciousness first rule. But he hasn't yet told us what in consciousness determines the specific content of the projection, what beliefs are operating, where those beliefs come from, how they got installed in your system, why some beliefs are conscious and some are hidden, what makes a belief powerful versus weak, how beliefs interact with each other to create complex patterns of projection. And that's where we're going next. Because understanding that you project is foundational, but understanding what you're projecting and why you're projecting it and how to change what you're projecting, that's where the practical power lives. That's where the techniques come from. That's where the transformation happens. And that requires a deeper understanding of how consciousness is structured, what beliefs actually are, where they live in your personality, how they operate together to create your complete worldview. Let me tell you where this curriculum is going, because I don't want you to think this video is the end. I don't want you to think understanding projection is enough. I don't want you to walk away with just the concept without the complete system to actually use it, because the concept without the system is just more information that doesn't change your life. We're building toward a complete framework that includes Seth's projection mechanism that we covered in this video, plus Bashar's 4 laws that govern how reality operates that we're covering in the next video, plus the timeline therapy structure that shows you where beliefs live in your personality so you can actually find them, plus Bashar's diagnostic questions that help you surface hidden beliefs you don't know you have, plus Neville's techniques for changing beliefs at the root level so the projection shifts automatically, plus Richard Dott's maintenance practices that keep you from reverting back to old projections once you've made the shift. 5 sources, each one essential, each one incomplete without the others, synthesized into one complete system that gives you mechanism, structure, diagnostic, protocols, and maintenance, everything you need to deliberately create reality instead of unconsciously creating struggle. And that complete system is what this channel exists to teach thoroughly, systematically, without gaps, without missing pieces, without the surface level inspiration that leaves you confused about why it's not working. So in the next video, we're covering Bashar's 4 laws, which are the rules that make reality creation inevitable, the principles that govern how consciousness operates, the structure that explains why projection must create experience, why inside must create outside, why belief must materialize into form. Those laws make everything we covered in this video not just theory, but mechanical necessity, not just possibility, but absolute rule. And once you understand the laws, you'll understand why reality creation always works, why you can never not create, why understanding this changes everything. But before we get there, I need you to really sit with what we covered today. Really absorb that you're not observing objective reality, you're observing your projection. Really understand that inside creates outside, not the other way around. Really accept that you've been trying to change the screen when you needed to change the projector. Really recognize that consciousness comes first, always, without exception, and physical reality is just the materialization of consciousness projected outward into form. Because once you really get that, once it clicks, once you see it operating in your own experience, you can never go back to thinking you're a victim. You can never go back to blaming external circumstances. You can never go back to trying to force change in the physical world without changing consciousness first. You'll know with absolute certainty that you are the creator, you are the projector, you are the source, and everything you're observing is something you called into being through your belief system. And when you know that, when you really know it, not as a concept, but as a lived understanding, as a mechanical reality you can see operating constantly, then you're ready for the next level, which is understanding the laws that make this mechanism inevitable, the structure that makes projection creation, the rules that govern how this whole system operates, and that's what we're covering next. So I'll see you in the next video, where we're breaking down Bashar's 4 laws of existence, the principles that make reality creation not just possible, but mechanically necessary, not just theory, but absolute rule, not just something that happens sometimes, but something that happens always without exception. And those laws are going to make everything we covered today click into place in a way that makes it undeniable.